That's everyone's dream, is earn an income doing what you enjoy, earn an income being yourself. So I saw that and I'm like, oh, okay, this is a possibility.
It was in 2019. You were making like $3,000 a month from courses and digital products. And then in 2020, you were doing 50K months.
I just realized like I'm still working for a boss. The boss has just taken a new disguise. A lot of people are afraid to put a product or service out when they're just starting out. And what they don't realize is that could be the main authority builder of their brand. But if you really sit and think rationally through every single limiting belief you have, you'll usually come out with the mind of, I just need to focus.
Welcome to the making of Dan Co. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Excited to have you on. So we're going to dig into your origin story in just a second, but I want to start the conversation here because I think it will give people context for the brain that you have and the way that you approach problems and being a creator. So you recently launched a video on YouTube about the death of personal brand. And you've been in this space for 7+ years. And in the video, you talk about how we can often get really caught up in titles, influencers, creators, building a personal brand. And we end up kind of focusing on the whirlwind of creating content. And we don't necessarily focus on creating transformational products and like meaningful, good things. Let's start here. And where has that journey kind of led you to this idea of like, okay, we need to stop focusing on creating so much content and actually create products that mean something to people?
Yeah. I think it's a trap or maybe a cycle that you can fall into quite often if you're not operating from the state of what made you want to start doing this in the first place. Where I started because I didn't want the job that I had at the time, where I know that a lot of people have absolutely incredible jobs that allow for a lot of growth and transformation in their life. But a lot of people that go the creator route don't have that luxury. And so that's why they're starting as a creator or personal brand or influencers, because they have a lot of interests and skills and they feel like they have a lot of value to provide to other people. And so they start doing this and then they start learning more about it, learning more about marketing, about sales, about branding, about content. And when you do that, you learn templates and you learn frameworks, and nothing wrong with that at all. But you start to see certain ones working better than another. So you double down on that thing. And if you aren't careful, you start to get locked into that one thing. And then if you branch out of it, you see less results and you perceive that as negative feedback rather than an opportunity to improve or experiment further. And so you go back to the comfortable frameworks or templates that you've been used to. And that leads to a lot of roboticism in your days. And that's what you were trying to escape in the first place. Mm-hmm. So the entire message behind that of being careful of identifying as a creator or personal brand or influencer, and rather identifying as just someone who wants to grow, become valuable, share that value, and live a good life and earn a good income because of it. That's the whole thing. Be careful of identifying with those things too heavily or frameworks that you're using too heavily, because one, those aren't the only things that work. And the entire fun in this business is the creative challenge and uncertainty that lies in it. So that's kind of my philosophy on being a creator, quote unquote.
I love that. It's interesting too, because now, I mean, we'll get into Cortex and all of that as well. But when you identify so heavily with being an influencer or being a creator, you can sometimes also box yourself in, like even your journey and your arc. If you would have only said, I am this one thing, could you see yourself becoming all that you've become now?
No, definitely not. That's the thing too, is I feel like it's a path where you have to set the end goal yourself rather than it being given to you by boss, parents, teachers, whatever it may be. And even with those, I think the entire reason of achieving a goal is to show you where you are or act as a new point of view for your life. So then you can go towards the next one and the next, and we can get into the topic of goals if we want to. But with the creator stuff, it's very fulfilling to just continuously go further, deeper and deeper into the unknown. So you gain this larger perspective of life, and you have the new skills, knowledge, expanded identity to show for it.
Yeah. Okay. This is like a great way to start the conversation because we're going to dig into this. And when I was doing prep for this, I was like, who was Dan as a kid? So let's take it back. Tell me about who you were as a kid. What were you like? What were you into?
A lot of things. The things that come to mind as like a very early child, the things that I remember, I loved Lincoln Logs. So I loved just building and Lincoln Logs, Legos, Bionicle, anything where I was building with my hands, I really enjoyed. I liked drawing in notebooks as well. So I always had that. I like doing creative things where I felt like I was just building something and creating something new. So reflecting back on that, I could see how it led to where I am today in a sense. And then as I grew up further, that's when YouTube became a thing, like MySpace, Facebook, YouTube. It was around that time. And I found these people posting videos on YouTube. And at the time, they weren't super professional. They weren't super edited or well done. It was just random people picking up the camera, filming their day around one main interest, typically. And the thing I was interested at the time as a high schooler, skinny high schooler, was going to the gym and getting fit. And I kind of fell down that rabbit hole. So I'd watch them. I'd watch the people in the fitness industry, the fitness space. And I noticed, I made a crucial observation, I would call it, that my life and their life are completely different, or the trajectory of my life is not going in the trajectory or in the direction of where they're at. I see them being authentic, having their main interest being the thing that is allowing them to make an income, right? That's like the dream, right? That's everyone's dream, is earn an income doing what you enjoy, earn an income being yourself. So I saw that and I'm like, oh, okay, this is a possibility. So I thank YouTube for showing me that, because that just wasn't a known in my life as a kid. And so although I didn't start pursuing that immediately, it kind of just stuck in the back of my head of, hey, there is another option and there is another route to go down. And I do believe that that kind of framed the decisions that I made throughout high school and college to lead to this point now.
Yeah. Was YouTube your first introduction to entrepreneurship, even if you didn't realize that's what entrepreneurship was at the time?
Oh, yeah. And I had no idea. The word entrepreneur, I think of the word entrepreneur as just some rich person, some billionaire, like way out of reach, and I was a kid, so I didn't know any better. And now looking back, it's like they were doing it in such a way where it didn't matter if they were an entrepreneur or not. They found the way, in my eyes, to just do what they want for a living and find some kind of meaning or fulfillment in that, because they're impacting a lot of people along the way and helping a lot of people. I wouldn't have half of the fitness knowledge that I have today. Fitness, nutrition, everything that I do today was just shaped by what I learned from people online.
Yeah. So when I take a look at your content on YouTube, Instagram, X, like I spend 60 seconds and I know that you have a very deep soul and you're very curious. And I'm curious how that originated for you. Like, have you always been this way? And my second question has that ever felt heavy? Like being deep and being so introspective. I think there's a relationship with like heaviness sometimes to that depth. And how has that kind of played a role in your life?
Yeah, good question, because we can go fairly deep with that. Is when I was younger, something I like to say often is that I was observant. Like I observed my family, I observed my siblings, I observed my teachers and my religious leaders, because I grew up in the LDS church or the Mormon church. And so there was a lot of, wasn't as strict as people think, but there was a lot of rules and things to look out for and things you should and you shouldn't do. And so when I started to observe those things and question them and see that a lot of people around me weren't really living a life that I wanted, I started to realize, okay, I need to seek information elsewhere, because I made the connection that if these people aren't living the life that I want to live, there's things that I can learn from them. Sure, good things. And there are a lot of good things that I learned from those people. But I have to be very careful with the information that I take and implement from them, because that could easily lead to me living a life that I don't want. So that alone, the anchor point of something that I didn't want in life kind of led to that natural curiosity of, okay, where do I go? Because there was no direction. So I kind of just had to start experimenting and learning. And the first thing for me was, of course, fitness, because a lot of the life I didn't want to live was feeling sluggish and not looking how I wanted to look, especially as a kid. Like, vanity's a big thing you have to fit in.
Yeah.
But the next thing after that, being in a fairly religious household, was I wanted to figure out if that was true. What if that teaching was true? Because if I'm going to live my entire life by those values and teachings, I'm doing myself a disservice if I don't understand it completely from all angles. So that led me down the rabbit hole of just studying different religions and no religion, like atheism, and dug into all of those. At one point, I guess you could say I classified myself as an atheist, but have kind of come around to what I think to be a more holistic view. And from all of that, I found that by pursuing my interests, all roads led back to my mind. And so now a lot of what I study and read is just psychology, epistemology, how do we know things, the philosophy of mind, anything that has to do with how we perceive information, how we relate to something greater than ourselves, like a purpose or some higher order or whatever it may be. Anything related to the mind is interesting to me. Therefore, most things are interesting to me. I feel like that's maybe a fun tip for a lot of people that aren't sure what to study. If you study the mind, since the mind is kind of your operating system for life, by studying the mind and by finding interest in the mind, you start to find interest in everything. I think everything is inherently interesting. And that's a good problem to have, is to find everything interesting. So that's what shapes a lot of my writing. And why I started writing in the first place is because it clears the mind. It helps you articulate your thoughts. It helps you order everything that's inside of it. So that's what led to the curiosity aspect. Now, in terms of the heaviness, or I would say like the sense of responsibility with going down a deeper rabbit hole or trying to surface deeper information, is I definitely feel a sense of responsibility with my writing and with what I create, because a lot of it is what other people talk about and is what is well accepted knowledge, but other things are lesser known. So, and they're very important and interesting to me. And so if I share them without some form of responsibility or passion or accuracy, or trying to make sure that I'm telling some form of truth, then I feel like I'm leading people down a wrong path. And I know a lot of that is inevitable, right? People have their own individual minds and they're going to perceive things how they perceive them.
Yeah.
But I do think that adds to a lot of the fulfillment and creativity and challenge that comes from that, is the responsibility of deciding to go down a certain rabbit hole of interest and sharing that information with others in a way that is applicable to their lives.
Yeah. I really respect the sense of social responsibility of wanting to teach it in a way that feels approachable, feels responsible. It feels caring, like the way that you've approached how you want to teach. It feels very empathetic and caring to the individual's journey. how much of the curiosity and the depth and the rabbit holes, as you call them, has been isolating, and how much of it has been liberating?
Oh, isolating a good amount, because it's difficult to find people that have gone down, if we're going to, I like the term rabbit holes. It's hard to find people. There's so many. It's hard to find people that have gone down the same and want to maintain some kind of discussion with you. So when you are in that state of obsession or curiosity over that thing, and that's the only thing you want to talk about or even want to think about, it does get fairly isolating, because it's hard to be present with the conversation you're having if the other person isn't necessarily in that same rabbit hole. What was the other
Liberating.
part?
So the
Liberating.
isolation, that makes sense. And then the liberation or freedom of research and information.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So ideology aside, the term liberal arts, I feel like, has lost its way as like a term or a concept, and what's taught in schools a lot of the times. But the original meaning of that, the liberal arts or the liberating arts, learning things that liberate you and allow you to be more free and create a life that you want, that's what I find in a more interest-based education. And like liberating arts, I guess you could frame under a few different skills like critical thinking and rationality and agency and strategy and typical things that allow you to have some form of a structure for your life, or to create some form of a structure. Think of the main skills of an entrepreneur or a CEO or an organization as a whole, the things that they have to learn in order to manage their business and their life, right? Rather than that be given to someone. Like when you are in a job, and I use jobs here as an example because they're the most prevalent, but it's across all domains of life. This isn't just in a job. Job is just like easy target for this, is when you get hired at a job and you go into it, or even when you go to school, you're given the structure, right? You're given the structure to operate under. So when a lot of people leave their jobs for the first time or even go into the creator route, one big issue that they have is just self-management, being able to manage their lives.
Yeah.
So in terms of the liberating arts and just interest-based education, it really is isolating because it can be very dangerous and there's a lot of traps along the way because you're taking your own path. But it can be extremely liberating for that reason as well, is you are in full control of where you end up.
Yeah. And speaking of control, so when you first launched your freelance business, you had learned web design underneath. I think like you were designing websites for a furniture company. Is that right?
Yeah, that was my first job. It was a retailer agency. Well, it was a web design agency, and we built e-commerce sites for retailers. So like furniture companies, appliance companies. So think like there's a Bassett Furniture down the road right here, or like Ashley Home Furniture.
Totally.
Like we would work with retailers that sold their stuff, and we would build websites for those retailers, but we already had their entire inventory in our backend. So it's just really easy to like click. These are the companies that I carry in my retail store, put them in a nice design. Now you can buy anything.
And before you went freelance on your own, how long had you had a boss? Because you've been an entrepreneur like the majority of your career. Is that right?
Yes. So before that, I had part-time jobs. I worked at a print shop for a good amount of time in college. And then before that, I wasn't good at keeping like fast food jobs. I worked at Subway in high school, and I worked at Chipotle sophomore year of college, and then as a lifeguard in high school and college over the summers. So had a boss for a lot of that time, but a lot of it was part-time. And then the first full-time job I had was the retailer or the agency. And I had that job for, I believe, 9 months before I was able to go out on my own. And most of that 9 months was just spent building the freelance business.
Yeah. And I remember reading you talking about how whenever you're building the freelance business, you were working with a lot of clients that were doing what you wanted to do. And I want to talk about that, like that time period of wanting to write online, wanting to build a social media audience, like wanting to have a bit more of that personal brand, if you will. But the like pause between recognizing you want something and then actually going and doing it. Because at that point, you're already an entrepreneur. You're already doing your own thing, but you wanted more. There was something that wasn't satiating you in some way. And you had this like light bulb moment of, I want to build something else, but you didn't do it right away. I don't think if my research is correct. So I want to talk about that pause and what that taught you and what like lit a fire under you.
Yes. So the freelance thing, it wasn't all it was chopped out to be. And I realized very quickly that I liked building the business more than I liked fulfilling the service for the client, because then I wasn't working on my own projects anymore.
Yeah.
Right. That's where I got all of my joy, was the Lincoln Logs that I was building as an adult, because it just gave me that creative freedom. It's what I like showing up and doing. So when I started getting these clients and I made the freelance business a quote unquote success by some definition, I just realized like I'm still working for a boss. The boss has just taken a new disguise. And of course, like freelancing can give you a lot of freedoms. It just didn't sit right for me. So as I was going through that, and as I was like getting onto Twitter and scrolling social media, that's when I kind of started to realize, okay, these people are doing very similar things to me, but there's a few differences. One, they have an audience. And two, they also have some kind of product. It could be a digital product. It could be a physical product. It was a product. It didn't require one-on-one fulfillment or done-for-you fulfillment, right? It's like you have a product, you distribute it to the person. So I eventually made sense of those two things. That's what the pause was, is I just couldn't make sense of it. I see these people and I'm wondering, okay, they're doing the same thing as me. They're writing these posts, but like I didn't see the value in social media yet. I just thought it was some place where people posted memes all the time. And so once it finally clicked, like, oh, audience equals distribution. If I were to just transition my freelance stuff over to there and do well at building an audience or practice the skill, as I've learned to do many times throughout my life, if I practice a skill, get good at it, I build an audience, I don't have to do this manual work or outreach to get these freelance clients anymore. That's a lot of time saved on my end. So become very enticing then. And then the other problem of me doing projects that I didn't necessarily care to do for the clients, that was solved through the product. And I could do the math at that point where I'm like, okay, if I have 1,000, 2,000 follower audience, I can't really sustain product growth with that. But I could slowly transition from one to the other, where I have this freelance service. I can build a product, see how that goes, really try to understand how to make that work. And then as that started doing better and better, started to slowly phase out the freelance work. Tried a bunch of stuff in between then and now, but that was the short journey of it.
Okay. Tell me about that first product. Like, how did it go? Because you also talk a lot about failure, which I think is a key component of your journey and just the way that you approach building.
Yeah. The first product actually did pretty good.
Okay.
And the other failure, so before the web design job, the reason I got the web design job in the first place is because I tried so many different business models and they all failed because I stopped working on them, right? That was like SEO, drop shipping, e-commerce store, a lot of the business models and courses you can take today. Mm-hmm. Those are what I failed at, but I learned so much from those courses that I don't even want to add some kind of negative connotation. I think the best thing people can do is buy those courses because it opens their mind to a completely new style of earning money. Mm-hmm. Great thing. In terms of the first product, it was a web design product. So I was already doing the freelance web design. I had followed people who were selling a web design product, like how to freelance with web design, how to build a website. So the first product was split into two parts. The first was how I freelance. The second was just how do you build a website? And with those, I followed, since I was kind of transitioning out of the web design job as well, and maybe at the web design job is when I was following developers, and I was just in that scene when I was learning programming and other things like that. So I followed a decent amount of developers, and I followed two accounts. One was selling a web design product, the other was selling a freelancing product for web developers. And I'm like, holy crap, that makes so much sense. Like, these web developers have an incredible skill. They make a good amount of money if they're in that occupation. That kind of took my beliefs away of, oh, these people won't buy my products, because I was that person. I was the person buying the web design courses, or all courses imaginable. So when that clicked for me, it's like, okay, make my own how to freelance product. And then once I started like promoting and selling that, by luck, I would assume, one of the web developer accounts that I follow reached out to me and was like, hey, like, you sell this freelance product? I have, like, a lot of people message me about, like, how do you start freelancing, because the developers that he's teaching doesn't want to go down the job route. And so he was like, can I affiliate for this course in some way? And so I'm like, yeah, because his audience was way larger than mine. And so I gave him like the 50% commission, because of digital product, easier to do that. And he started promoting it all the time. So I saw sales start coming in, and I'm like, no way, this is crazy. And since I was interacting with all of these people that had larger audiences, and I'd kind of proven my value with my freelance business and the product, they respected me more and saw me as some kind of an authority that maybe deserved more followers, and that I was competent in that domain. Tangent there is, I feel like a lot of people are afraid to put a product or service out when they're just starting out. And what they don't realize is that could be the main authority builder of their brand. So they're missing out on a lot of authority just because they don't sell something. So it's one thing to take into account, is you don't necessarily need the audience up front, because there's other ways to get distribution. Like, I can use this guy's audience who has a large audience of web developers. I can partner with a lot of people to get traffic to my product. So that's how I started selling it. And then as my audience grew, because I had the added authority and people were kind of just talking to me in the replies, and like, traffic comes to your profile, I grew, and then I started to make sales on my own, and it did pretty well for a while. And then finally decided I'm done with web design and went a completely different direction.
Well, a couple of things to mention with the How to Freelance course. It goes back to your earlier statement of when you quit your job, you don't know how to self-manage. And so it's interesting, like, that was how you helped helping freelancers figure out how to self-manage their freelance business. And then my next question is around the distribution piece, growing in revenue, partnerships, affiliates. There was a year where you were going, I think it was in 2019, you were making like $3,000 a month from courses and digital products. And then in 2020, you were doing 50K months. Is that jump from a mixture of the affiliate partnerships and then just growing an audience on social? Or were there any other factors for you that really took it from, 4 figures to 5?
Yes. So there were a few things there where that's when I launched the first circle community. Actually, it's not a thing anymore, Modern Mastery. Had that for a while. That was like a recurring membership. And I did pretty well with the promotion of that. And around that time, I believe it was between like 50 and 80,000 followers on Twitter. So a decent amount. And I felt like I could really feel a community at that point, a paid community. So did that, worked up slowly, built it up. And then on top of that is when I reintroduced a high ticket product as well. So that's when I had a more hands-on branding and marketing program, like a coaching program in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
But it was curriculum based, guiding people through it. And it was a mixture of what I did as a freelancer and what I had learned throughout social media. Because now that I saw the light of building an audience, it's like I have to incorporate this somehow into things that I teach. And so, yeah, the branding, marketing program plus the community led to that first 50K month.
Okay, let's talk about Modern Mastery.
Yep.
What was the decision to start a membership and what was the decision to close the membership?
Very good question. So the reason to start is on Twitter. I say Twitter a lot because that's
all right.
the main
we
social
all know.
media
We
I
get
log
it.
in. Yeah. But I was on Twitter and in the business and startup space, and everyone's talking about the magic of MRR, right? Where with a static priced product, you just have to continuously sell. With something that generates MRR or monthly recurring revenue, is someone pays $29 one month, they're probably going to pay $29 the next month. And if you can retain them because your product is good and they're getting value out of it, they'll continue paying until they don't see it as valuable anymore for them. So that was the entire thing, is like, oh, wow, this makes a lot of sense. If I can get 100 customers one month and then 100 the next month and 100 the next month, and I continue doing that, it's just like, it just keeps going up. But if I did that with a course, the number stays the same each month. That was my justification. Growing a community is definitely harder, and it's not as simple as like 100 a month. But that was the main reason I started it. The reason I closed it is a few reasons. The first is I feel like I had achieved the purpose that I set out to with that community. And it was a mixture of a lot of things. So Modern Mastery, it was supposed to be like a educational / community platform for people interested in health and business and general self-improvement and sometimes even relationships and getting people on and talking about those things. I started the community by putting all of my previous courses in there. So nobody could buy the other courses anymore. It was just you go into the community or you don't. So that was like to get people in and over that first hump of paying for that first month. The added bonus was you get 3 courses. And then beyond that, we had the community structured out in a pretty good way. We can go into that if we want to. But the reason I closed it is because I just felt like I didn't have anything else to write. I felt like all of the information was there, and me writing anything more was either going to be me repeating myself or giving out information that doesn't really need to be given out, right? And so I felt the community diluting in value just because we felt like we had to continue adding to it because it was a monthly subscription. So that can be worked around if you structure the community in a different way and don't base the payments off of like recurring information being put in there.
Yeah.
So that was one of the reasons we closed it. And then just other pursuits. So I had other courses at the time that I enjoyed or that were better than the previous courses in my eyes. And then new business as a whole, Cortex, I knew it was going to take up more time. Just, didn't make sense to continue with it.
No, I think the reason I wanted to talk about it and it's important, and well, you know, whether you're pro paid membership or anti paid membership, it doesn't really matter. The reason I'm bringing it up is that normalizing starting something, putting a lot of effort into it, getting people a lot of results, and then making the decision to close it down. Like when you sunset any product, just normalizing that. And I think a lot of times you see that that internal tension of an entrepreneur, creator trying to figure out, okay, this feels like I am at the edge of what I came to do here. Like my work here is done. And for you to listen to that voice and trust yourself enough to decide, all right, this has either become diluted or my work here is done and I'm going to refocus on something else. I think that's also a common thread of your work is focus. And so you're not going to spread yourself thin and water down any of your products and messages, which I highly respect. So yeah, I think it's important just to normalize closing programs, shutting down products that no longer are serving you or serving the people that you want in the way that you want.
I agree. And with other things, I'm very good at just like ending it and moving on to the next thing. But with a community, that's difficult.
Yeah.
Like just in terms of money, because everyone's attached to money in some way or another. I'm not going to act like I'm not. Canceling 1,000+ memberships is difficult. Like monetarily, it's like I could continue this, but I just can't. And that was a tough decision. Is 1,000 memberships and like figuring out how to break it to people who were in that community for such a long time and actually really did get value out of it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, as a whole, it was a very important piece of my journey and hopefully a lot of other people's journeys and lives. But yeah, had to end.
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. Let's talk about Cortex, because even though you closed Modern Mastery, you and your team have built Cortex, and there's also a community, like communities at the center of that as well. So can you talk about what Cortex is? I know it's the second brain for creators, but talk about the genesis of the idea, like why you got into this kind of product, and then why you've decided to launch it with a community at its center.
Yes. So started Cortex, which at the moment, to visualize it without trying it, you can think of a minimalist version of Notion or Obsidian, or Notion and Obsidian, because there's connections. It's more of a second brain than it is Notion, with a nice capture feature. And so that's kind of the base that we had to start with. And that takes a lot of development in and of itself. But that's the base that we had to start with to get in the features that we're working on now, which include a lot of AI synthesis of notes and other things, ingestion of almost any kind of file, being able to read anything or store anything inside of it and write within it and reference all of that information right when you need it. So it's a writing app and second brain. We're in that period where we don't really know what we are until we really get the next features in or how to explain ourselves. We know where we want to go. But the origin of it was I used, or into our writer, the system that I teach into our writer, or just my writing process in general. I used Notion and Hemingway, like a text editor, to write my newsletters and write my content. And I realized that it just wasn't really cutting it. I could, of course, write every single week, but I tried second brain apps before. And if you haven't built out a second brain of notes, even if it takes a long time to do so, you don't really understand the power of connections and the novel ideas that it can birth. Like, I attribute a lot of my writing simply by how I have my quote unquote second brain organized, so that if I'm outlining a specific newsletter, article, tweet, I can search and reference all of these novel ideas, and my writing isn't just born from a linear thought process where it's like I have a topic to write about, I have a problem to solve, I have a goal to work towards. I can write newsletters and articles like that all day, but that's what everyone's doing. I need something unique and novel, and I need to weave in these anecdotes, statistics, concepts, other things. That's what Cortex helps me with. And I capture ideas nonstop on walks, and I just needed a better way to do that. So that was the genesis of Cortex, is the system that I teach and the system that I use is so much better in it, right? So we built around a better writing process. And then in terms of why community forward, is because I'm very big on education. I would personally say that education is the new marketing. Of course, marketing is a thing, but education, not schooling. There's a big difference between schooling and education. education, discovering novel ideas, going down an interest-based pathway. And when I say interest-based, kind of like my childhood to an extent, is when you start studying something that you're very interested in, you're almost always going to have to learn so much more than that one specific thing. So by learning one thing out of interest or curiosity, you're exposed to so much more. And so in terms of the education side of the marketing is with Cortex, since it was so new and since it is right now a kind of general note-taking software, it isn't anything specific, right? And that's kind of like rule number one of marketing is have a unique mechanism, have something that solves a burning problem in someone's life, go where the money is, whatever it may be. We didn't really want to do that with Cortex. I just wanted to build something that was useful for me.
Mm-hmm.
So the education aspect of it in the community with a course inside of there and different channels, just being able to interact with our users, that has obvious business and product benefits in and of itself, getting feedback on the product. But we had to teach people how to use Cortex. If we wanted those super fans, especially at the start, we had to help them get started and give them a system, because that's a problem across the board with people starting in Notion or Obsidian or any kind of writing app is you're starting with a blank page. Unless you have your own project that you want to build or start with, or you already have a process, you're not going to get too far or see the value in those apps. So education for us was just it is still a crucial point in our marketing, because we have to show people how to achieve their goals inside of Cortex, because that isn't baked into the software itself.
Yeah, this is exactly how Circle has approached its Circle customer community. It's through education. Yeah. Like, it's why we have the showcase side, because when you build a Circle community and you get into your account for the first time, your spaces are blank, it's blank. And so when it can be overwhelming about all the different opportunities and ways to build something. And so I love that you're doing community first, education first, and using that to inform the product. Like, think about where the product's going to be in 2 years, because your feedback loop with your customers is so close versus I love the approach. So speaking of like the loyalty and the community piece, you have built a massive audience, one that many people would be like, okay, yeah, that's my goal. Like Dan Co is my goal. But the aspect of your content is also the nature of it, I find to be very trust building. Like, there's a level of vulnerability to the way that you approach your topics, the way that you film, the way that you write. And then it's also coupled with the education piece as well. And I'm curious, like, how do you transfer the trust of a viewer or of a reader into the trust of someone who's going to pay you money? And I think this is a very common creator entrepreneur question. But for you, have there been any certain methodologies or frameworks that have helped you kind of transition from a lukewarm viewer, reader, newsletter subscriber into someone that's wildly passionate about your products, and they're writing you testimonials, and they're signing up for your community? Like, what's that journey look like?
Yes. If I could break it down into maybe 2 or 3 things, I would say the first is learning something new. In every single piece of long form content, mainly, short form content, it touches on these things I'm going to mention occasionally, because there's only so much room to do so. But in long form content, especially, teaching people something new, so they feel like they left as if they've learned something that they can implement or do in their life. And that can be as simple as one sentence. If that sentence is super impactful, then I'm good to go. The second thing is a novel perspective. And what I mean by novel perspective is kind of giving them a puzzle piece. If their mind were a puzzle, I'm giving them a puzzle piece to see something more clear. So if I'm talking about business, it could happen in a multitude of ways, but I'm trying to attack an angle or perspective that hasn't been touched on the most, that I see as impactful. So I'm just adding a different layer, because being in this space, when you're a creator and you're keeping your pulse on the market, you're paying attention to content, you know the information in the general space that you're in. I see it as my job to push out of that boundary just a tiny bit. And by doing that, every single piece of content, I'm building this very unique brand simply because I made that simple choice in one newsletter or YouTube video. So novel perspective, learning something new, and pursuing depth, trying to make it deeper in some way. Like for me, I can tell if when I'm writing something, if I choose the topic, I start writing, I can tell whether or not that information is meaningful. It's, you can just tell. Like if you're reading, you're watching something, you can box it into two categories of shallow or superficial and meaningful. And so I try to work one thing in that is meaningful to me or that I think other people would benefit from, even if it's not for everyone. So a lot of the times that has to do with my deeper interests, like the things that are difficult to talk about with people that I know, but I know I can find some people online that will enjoy those things.
100%.
So the philosophy stuff, the philosophy of mind, psychology, metaphysics, epistemology, these little things that I like to pull concepts from and try to connect to business in some way, that usually covers all bases of novel perspective and learning something new. So if I choose a topic that I know is going to perform well, like on YouTube, business related, how to make money, how to land clients, whatever it may be, baking in something somehow philosophically wise or something deeper there. And people seem to really appreciate that from me.
Do you take that same approach when you're building a product as well?
Yes. Yeah. And sometimes it shoots me in the foot because you've seen my videos. Those are based off of my newsletter. My newsletters are notoriously long, and some people don't like that. Other people really do like that. That's what sets me apart to them. But with that, when I write, I'm the quietest person you'll ever meet in real life. I cannot shut up when I'm writing. So in a course where it's pretty important for people to complete the entire thing and get a lot out of the entire thing, I'm just drawing myself out. And I know I'm doing it, but I know some people, the very few people that will appreciate it, do appreciate it. So yes, I try to bake that into my products, but sometimes it could be seen as like not a good thing because it adds more quote unquote fluff. Fluff, I think, is subjective to people, but it adds more fluff to the products.
Yeah. No, but I think that the differentiating factor of like being novel, like having an in-depth course, you're going to have an in-depth course. Like if they're going to read your newsletter, they're going to have the same sort of approach to taking your course. It's going to match, like the vibe, if you will, is going to be aligned between the content you put out and what they're experiencing in a course or membership. No, that makes perfect sense. I want to end us here because I know that you wrote a book this year. Well, probably wrote it over the course of years, but it came out this year, The Art of Focus. And I think this is like, from the outside looking in, this seems to be your zone of genius, is like truly how to focus it on something and get something done. And I'm curious how, for people that are feeling like there's something in them, like you, whenever you were younger, you're like, there's something in me that wants more and wants to create more, but it does require a sense of focus to get it done. What advice would you give to them if they're feeling overwhelmed and they just need like, again, maybe it's structure, like how do they find focus?
Yes. There's two polar ends to it where the goal with focus is just clear perception and framing your mind towards the one goal that you're trying to achieve, right? In order to achieve clear perception, there's a bunch of different ways to go about that. You can do brain dump journaling. You can create a plan for your future. You can map out all of the things. You can get very specific with what you want, what you don't want out of life, and what you're going to do to get from what you don't want to what you want. And that process alone is very powerful if you sit with those things for a while. So what you don't want, fill a page with that. What you do want, fill a page with that. Now, what's in between? What skills, knowledge, education? What do you have to do? What do you have to study in order to get from one to the next? The other thing there that I feel like a lot of people struggle with is, you could call it limiting beliefs. Yeah, limiting beliefs, or just thoughts that pop up and act as distractions and keep you from actually taking action, because you give validity to that thought of like, oh, you can't do this, or oh, what's mom going to think, or oh, is it actually going to work out? The challenge I have for those people is really just sit and think through those thoughts. Think through them, like all the way to the end of the conversation. Have a conversation with those thoughts. Go all the way to the end. How does it work out? Is it going, like, if the thought is it going to work out? Am I going to make this work? Think of the options. Yes. Okay. What happens? You make it work. No. Okay. What happens? Does your life end? Does your life change by that much? Did you waste time? No, because you would have been wasting time if you weren't doing that, right? That's the definition of wasting time. So it's either you fail and you learn something new, and it's like, okay, well, I at least did something productive for the last year of my life and learned a lot. And now I have better experience to try again. Because if I don't try again, the only other option, by definition, if this is something that I want to do, is to waste time. So if you really sit and think rationally through every single limiting belief you have, you'll usually come out with the mind of, I just need to focus. And at that point, you probably will.
I love that. Thank you for that. That's really, really powerful. And even as you were talking, some of my own limiting beliefs are popping up. I was like, I usually stop when I think of them instead of following the thread all the way through and really playing it out. So that's really helpful advice. This has been phenomenal. I love hearing the way that you think, and it's very inspiring, but it's also like the way that you talk with such conviction. I think it's inspiring to allow people to like go out and ask bigger questions and to have bigger discussions. So thank you for your work. Thank you for building a community in general, but thank you for having this conversation. And I'm curious, what's next for you? Like, what big dream are you working on that maybe isn't Cortex? Because I know that's probably like the one that you're going to say, but the one that's not associated to what you're building. Maybe it's a side dream right now.
Ooh, I don't know. I feel like a lot of it's all going into my work. Like, that's just what I love. So I'd say that more books on the horizon.
Heck yeah.
Lots of walks. Yeah.
Awesome. I love it. Well, we all know where we can find you on the internet, and I'll have it linked up in the show notes. Dan Coe, thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Yes. Thank you for having me on.
Wow. This conversation with Dan was so powerful. Please drop a comment below and share what you've learned from this episode, or leave us a review if you're listening on Apple or Spotify. Next, we have a special guest. His name is Brian Maierhofer. He's a marriage and family therapist, and he shares how Dan Coe's mentorship transformed his mindset and business approach. As an early member of the Cortex community, Brian gained clarity on systems and strategies, leading to significant income growth for his business. He emphasizes the connection between business success and self-growth, inspired by Dan's holistic approach to mentorship. Now, Brian is building a community and hosting a somatic psychology course applying Dan's teachings to combine mental health expertise with personal and professional development. Let's hear from Brian. Hello, Brian Maierhofer. Welcome to The Making of. I'm so excited to spend some time with you today.
Likewise. Yeah. Thanks for having me here. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So share a little bit about what you do now, and then we'll kind of dig into how you first discovered Dan.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I work in mental health. I'm an associate marriage family therapist. I used to own and run a sober living, spent a lot of time working in treatment, and sort of identified the culture there, the workplace culture, and also the culture for clients, and how big sort of the census was, and what that experience was like, both for our workers, our helpers, and the folks that are getting services, and really identified a lot of difficulties, a lot of challenges, right? And so had this initial thesis of, can I take this model and build this ecosystem online and build a mental health community online that's decentralized in some ways, sort of innovative, not attached to some of the, bureaucratic or I won't say legal, but maybe some of the stuff that takes a little bit longer to adapt to the current changes. So that was the thesis and the intention, and building that in public right now. So the early stages of that one.
That's amazing. Important work. And it is cool to be able to transition, in practice, in like more of a legal practice, as well as doing something online. So tell me the very first time that you discovered Dan. Was it on social media? Like, where did you first come across his work? Because he has a pretty big body of work.
He's got an immense body of work. Yeah, I first found him on Instagram, I think so. I kept seeing, his posts on there, and obviously it was just script, just text, and was just really struck by his ability to communicate in a visceral, emotional language, really connecting, accessible language. And I sort of fell into his ecosystem there. I'd seen his stuff and was shocked by how young he was, just from his profile picture. It was kind of vague, you couldn't tell, and it's an impressive resume for his age. And so then when I got a little bit more information on him and sort of learned about more specific in who his work and what his offers were, it really opened up a whole new world. I'd been circling putting my business as a therapist, as a life coach online for a long time. I've been circling, building an audience on social media. And then it wasn't until last summer, I was walking the Camino de Santiago up the coast of Portugal into Spain, this old pilgrimage, about 270 miles over the course of 11 days I walked. And
Wow.
I was listening to Dan in the moments when I needed some stimulus, when my head was a little too loud. And so I spent hours and hours and hours listening to his content. And I began to strategize my idea ecosystem. I began to strategize, how I was going to start attacking when I returned back to the States last fall. So it was a quick introduction.
Wow. And sometimes people's content does hit you so directly, and then you just go so deep on their content and you feel like you've known them forever. So sometimes it doesn't take a long time to trust someone when you at one see their body of work, but then also go kind of in a deep dive on it. And he offers so many like different perspectives, as well as just a different approach to getting into business. It's like a very psychology forward approach, which I assume really resonated with you. So then you get back from this pilgrimage, which sounds amazing, by the way. And then you sign up for a program. Like what was your first like introductory to working with him and in a more like, programmed container?
Yeah. So it was really fortunate timing, and that Dan had just built this and developed this software, Cortex, and was looking for some people to beta test it, and was looking for, the early stages of this launch and what would be this Cortex community that he's built on Circle. And so I was in the first wave of that. I think I was one of the first 5 people that ended up signing up for Cortex. So what happened was I got back, I was sitting in my office, I was prepping client notes, getting ready, and I saw a post come through on X about sending in a writing sample. So that afternoon on my lunch break, I sent in a writing sample about one of my favorite archetypes, the archetype of the wounded healer, who has previously been wounded, healed, and now who helps heal other people. And I think it was, maybe that next day that I got an email from Dan's direct email. And I was honestly in shock, to be honest. And so I joined Cortex. I recognized the opportunity here to have this relationship with him and learn from the best in a real apprenticeship. And so I ended up signing up for a year mentorship program with him. And so I had the opportunity to meet with him about once a week. I'm about 11 months into that. So I got one more month left.
Wow. Talk about the proximity effect of being able to be mentored and be close to someone who is living in alignment with what you're building. So what, over the last 11 months, what's transpired for you and your business from this idea, last fall, summer to where you are now?
The first thing that struck me, and I said this to Dan as well, just was his generosity and his earnestness and desire to help. That really struck me. More on on an outcome level, I definitely went from, I work maybe about 1/10 of the amount of time as I used to work. And I'm probably more than 10x my income. So, I mean, it works. The stuff works. Right. And so, yeah, to have the opportunity for osmosis and to be close to somebody who reinvented the wheel in some ways and just such a tactician. I don't think, and I said this to him a couple of weeks ago, I don't think it actually really clicked for me until about a month ago, which is hilarious, right? I mean, I'm willing to take action. I follow good direction, but being able to see the whole scope and understand the systems, how the different systems impact, which is what he communicates so clearly and what is so attractive in his work, but it needs to be experienced. It's more visceral than heard, right? And so I finally clicked for me about month 8, month 9, and I was like, oh, this is what he's been saying to me for the last year. It makes sense. Yeah.
Was there a specific moment that influenced that puzzle piece clicking into place?
Yeah, I think it really, Dan has this idea of just continuing to iterate based off of your audience feedback, right? And really don't shortchange the audience and their desires, right? And so finally receiving some fruits, some nice wins based off of the continued iteration of my product and service, I think is it. And recognizing that those wins were directly within my control and influence, right? There's no guessing games. There's no blind faith, right? There's a specific way of positioning and communicating that is going to facilitate those wins that I wasn't privy to previously, right? And so really understanding the ability to influence, that confidence, has been a direct result of working with Dan and spending that much time with Dan. I don't think I would have had it without it.
Wow. That's incredible. Well, is there a specific, I know we've talked a little bit about tactics and like you being able to 10x your return. What about on the like personal mindset shifts? Like, has there been a new belief that you have believed because of working and being in osmosis with him that you're like, oh, this has really shifted like some of your perspective about yourself and about what's possible?
I think what has actually been nicest about it is that the perspective has been mirrored and held. So I don't think there's a lot of people, it wasn't necessarily a brand new perspective, but a validation of what I came in with, which is a lot of people don't speak on it when they speak on business. Understanding that your business is a mirror for your relationship with self. That's how I talk about it, right? It's just a mirror for self, just anything. And one thing holds everything, right? Yeah. The universe is held in one free throw, whatever it is, right? And so having a mentor who has that holistic approach, right? Who's self-generated, who's internally generated, self-directed from a deep well of intellect and wisdom and instinct is extremely unique.
Yeah, I agree. Even in the hour-long conversation, I was like, that well is deep. And we talked about his ability to hold so much depth and how that transpired for him. And so it's interesting to hear, you mention that as well. If you could say one thing to him, I know it's kind of hard to distill it down because I can tell that his impact on you has been quite big. But if you could distill it down, you could say one thing to him, what would it be?
Oh, it would be 2 things. It would be 1, we're just getting started. And 2, you were right. I had $100,000 worth of a product stuck in my head. He was right.
I love that. Well, Brian, I cannot wait to see you continue to scale. I know that you're also building some cool things on Circle. Do you want to talk about that for a second, if you're open to it?
I'd love to. Yeah, absolutely. So, been on Circle for the better part of this year. So right now I'm hosting my course in there. So it is a somatic psychology course. So somatic therapy it's a body-based approach, right? Bottom up, we really start with the body to improve our mental health. And so I have a somatics course in there. I got, close to 300 people in there right now, which is awesome. I've been able to run workshops out of it. The community support has been phenomenal. The tech support has been phenomenal. Been super happy with it. So much so that I'm actually going to be teaming up with another one of Dan Coe's students, Dan Goldfield's. And we're teaming up. We're going to be offering some more business support as well. We're both mental health guys, but again, the synthesization, being able to combine the two is so important. So, and we're going to be keeping that on Circle too. So yeah, super excited.
Awesome. I love it. I love to hear it. Can't wait to see and hear more about what you and Dan are building. And thank you so much for your time. It's always meaningful to hear the true impact of what someone has on an individual. I think you can look at someone's email list or like the metrics associated with them online, but then to hear from a real human being who's been like deeply impacted by them. I mean, that's what community is all about. That's what this is all about. So I really appreciate you sharing your story today.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah. Thanks for having me.